Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much pressure the cue card puts on candidates. Imagine having just 1 minute to organize your thoughts before speaking for 2 minutes straight. That time crunch alone can throw off even confident speakers.
Absolutely. And the structure of the cue card itself adds another layer. For example, a prompt like "describe your favorite place" usually comes with sub-questions. So you're not just telling a story, you're expected to hit specific points, like why it's your favorite and who you go there with.
But what if someone freezes up during that 1 minute? Is there any way to make sure you don't run out of things to say, especially if you're nervous?
Here's the takeaway. Preparation is everything. Practicing with a timer, jotting down quick bullet points, and rehearsing aloud can help build the mental agility needed to brainstorm under pressure. It's not about memorizing answers, but about training your brain to organize ideas fast.
And examiners are listening for more than just content. They're evaluating fluency, pronunciation, and how well you link your ideas. According to official IELTS criteria, coherence and lexical resource are just as important as answering the question.
So if someone just lists facts without connecting them, does that hurt their score? Or is it better to focus on telling a story, even if you miss a detail?
It's actually better to show how your ideas connect. Examiners want to see logical flow, not just isolated facts. Missing a minor detail isn't as damaging as losing coherence or running out of things to say.
The pivotal point is that this section can make or break your overall speaking score. Mastering the cue card challenge means balancing speed, structure, and self-confidence, all in just a few minutes. Only after 2 iterations we realized how much stronger a description becomes when you tap into all 5 senses, not just sight. For example, describing a park as lush and green is fine, but adding the scent of fresh-cut grass or the distant laughter of children makes it memorable.
That's true, but can you explain how to avoid overcomplicating things? Sometimes students pile on adjectives and metaphors, and the result is confusing rather than vivid.
I used to do that. I'd write, "The dazzling, shimmering, emerald green lake sparkled under the golden, radiant sun," and my teacher said it was too much. Now, I try to pick just 1 or 2 strong images, like the lake shimmered under the afternoon sunday.
Here's the takeaway. Clarity always wins. Examiners want to see you can use sophisticated language, but if your meaning gets lost, it works against you. A well-placed metaphor like "the city buzzed like a beehive" is more effective than a string of unrelated adjectives.
And research backs that up. According to a Cambridge assessment guide, essays with precise, varied vocabulary scored higher than those overloaded with decorative words. It's about balance, using sensory details and idioms, but keeping the message clear.
So, if I want to describe my favorite cafe, I could say, "The aroma of roasted coffee beans wrapped around me, and the chatter blended with the clinking of cups." That uses smell and sound, right?
Exactly. And if you add a metaphor or an idiom like "the cafe felt like a cozy cocoon on a rainy day," you're showing range without overdoing it. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much a clear structure boosts confidence during IELTS Part 2. When you know exactly what comes next: introduction, features, meaning, then a story. It's easier to keep your answer flowing for the full 2 minutes.
That's true. But can you explain how someone can actually remember all those steps under pressure? I've seen candidates freeze even if they know the order in theory.
I use a simple mnemonic: IFMS, introduce, features, meaning, story. During the 1-minute prep, I jot down 1 word for each part. That way, even if I blank out, I just glance at my notes and keep going.
Here's the takeaway. Using a fixed structure doesn't mean sounding robotic. You can still add natural transitions like "what makes this place special" is to connect each section smoothly.
But what if you run out of ideas before the timer ends? Isn't it risky to rely on a strict outline if you finish too soon?
If that happens, I loop back and add a personal reflection or compare the place to somewhere else I've been. It's better than repeating yourself or stopping early.
And remember, examiners look for coherence, not just content. Even if you improvise, keeping your answer organized signals strong communication skills. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much the prompt "describe your favorite place" can trip people up. Some go for a childhood bedroom, others pick a whole city. The range is huge.
That's true, and I've noticed that test takers sometimes wonder if they should choose a real place or invent something more imaginative. Statistically, about 60% stick to real locations, but those who create an imaginary place often score higher on descriptive language.
But what if someone's favorite place is really ordinary, like a local cafe? Wouldn't that seem less impressive compared to, say, a magical forest or a famous landmark?
It depends. The key is the personal connection. If you can explain why that cafe matters to you, maybe it's where you wrote your first poem or met your best friend, it becomes memorable.
And cultural background plays a role too. For example, in some cultures, describing a family gathering spot is common, while others might focus on natural landscapes. There's no universal best choice, but the richness of detail is what sets responses apart.
So, would you say it's better to be authentic? Or should you aim for creativity even if it's not your real favorite place?
Here's the takeaway. Authenticity gives your answer depth, but creativity lets you showcase vocabulary. The best responses usually balance both. Choose a place you care about, then describe it in a way that brings it to life. Only after 2 iterations, we realized that answers about a favorite place really stand out when you share a genuine story, not just a list of features. Here's the takeaway. Authenticity makes the examiner remember you.
That's interesting, but can you explain how much detail is too much? I've seen candidates get lost in describing every corner of a cafe, but the examiners seem to lose interest.
I think it's about balance. For example, when I talked about my grandma's garden, I focused on how the smell of jasmine made me feel safe. It wasn't just about the flowers, but the emotions tied to them.
Exactly. Research shows that emotional language increases listener recall by up to 30%. So, if you connect your answer to a personal memory, it's more likely to stick.
But what if your favorite place is something ordinary like a bus stop? Is it better to embellish, or should you stick to the truth even if it sounds boring?
Honestly, even a bus stop can be special if you share a real story, like waiting there every morning with your best friend. It's the meaning behind the place that matters.
Here's what matters. Sincerity beats exaggeration. Examiners can tell when you're making things up, and it risks sounding generic. A simple, heartfelt anecdote is more powerful than a dramatic but fake story. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how easy it is to fall into the trap of repeating the same adjectives when describing a favorite place. That habit can make your answer sound flat and unmemorable.
Absolutely. I've noticed that when people get nervous, they often default to phrases like beautiful or nice over and over. According to a recent IELTS examiner report, varied vocabulary is one of the top criteria for a high score.
But what if you suddenly forget a word or lose your train of thought? Sometimes I just start rambling and end up talking about something totally unrelated.
That's a common pitfall. Here's the takeaway. If you lose focus, pause for a second, take a breath, and try to steer back by mentioning a specific detail about your place, like a smell or a sound. It helps anchor your answer.
Another mistake is giving too much background. For example, spending half your time explaining how you got there instead of what makes the place special. Examiners want relevant, vivid details, not a travelogue.
So, would it be better to focus on 1 or 2 unique features instead of listing everything?
Exactly. Prioritize depth over breadth. Describe how the sunlight hits the walls or the way the air smells after rain. Those specifics stick in the listener's mind and show language range. Only after 2 iterations, we realized that using a past perfect clause mid-sentence can actually slow you down if you haven't practiced it enough. Here's the takeaway. Complexity is great, but it has to be automatic.
That's so true. For example, when candidates try to use relative clauses like the book that I bought yesterday, they often pause to remember the structure, which interrupts their flow. According to IELTS band descriptors, fluency is penalized if you hesitate too much, even if your grammar is advanced.
Can you explain how to practice those structures so they don't sound forced? I always worry that if I focus on grammar, my sentences will feel unnatural.
The trick is to build muscle memory. For instance, take one complex structure like a third conditional and use it in 10 different sentences about your day. After a week, it'll start to feel natural.
And don't forget, it helps to record yourself. When you listen back, you'll notice if your intonation drops or if you're pausing in odd places. Research shows that self-monitoring increases both accuracy and fluency over time.
But what if you make a mistake while trying to use something like a mixed conditional? Should you correct yourself? or just keep going?
If you can correct it smoothly, do it. But if it breaks your rhythm, it's better to keep going. Examiners value natural delivery more than perfection in every clause. Only after 2 iterations, we realize that candidates who sound genuinely enthusiastic tend to grab the examiner's attention, even if their vocabulary isn't perfect. That's a nuance most people miss.
Can you explain that in more detail? Because I've seen Band 8 candidates who stumble a little, but their delivery feels spontaneous and natural, almost like they're telling a story to a friend.
I partly agree, but isn't it risky to rely on enthusiasm if your answer is a bit disorganized? I mean, examiners still need to see clear structure and logical flow, right?
Absolutely. The data shows that coherence and cohesion account for about 25% of the score in Part 2. If someone jumps around or loses track, it's tough to get above Band 6, no matter how lively they sound.
Last week, we got stuck on the myth that memorized answers are a safe bet. But every examiner I've spoken to says they can spot a rehearsed script instantly, intonation flattens out, and the response loses that spark.
So, is it better to risk a few mistakes but sound real, or play it safe and memorize? Because I know some candidates are terrified of making grammar errors.
Here's the takeaway. Delivery trumps perfection. Examiners reward candidates who recover from slips and keep going, showing they can communicate under pressure. That's what separates a Band 6 from a Band 8. Only after 2 iterations, we realize that candidates often freeze when the follow-up question isn't what they expect. It's not just about language skill. It's about adapting in real time.
That's so true. For example, if you're asked to describe a memorable trip and then suddenly get, "What would you change about that experience?" it forces you to think beyond your prepared answer. The trick is to quickly connect your original story to a new angle.
But what if you don't understand the follow-up? I always worry about that. Is it better to ask for clarification, or just try to answer anyway?
Here's the takeaway. Asking for clarification is actually a strength. It shows you're engaged and not just memorizing. Plus, it buys you a few seconds to organize your thoughts.
And when you do answer, avoid repeating your main points word for word. Instead, add a detail or a personal reflection. For instance, if the follow-up is about challenges, share a specific moment you struggled, even if it's minor.
Sometimes I try to turn the question into a chance to show another skill, like comparing 2 experiences or using a new tense. Is that risky?
It's actually a smart move, as long as you stay on topic. Examiners notice when you expand naturally, not just for the sake of showing off grammar. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much a vague answer can drag down your score. When someone says, "My favorite place is the park because it's nice," it just doesn't cut it.
Exactly. Examiners look for specific details like describing the smell of grass or the sound of children playing. In the last IELTS cycle, candidates who gave concrete examples scored, on average, 0.7 bands higher in Speaking Part 2.
But what if you're not sure what details to add? Sometimes I freeze and just repeat myself. Would recording my answer help, or is it better to get feedback from a friend?
Recording is a game changer. You catch those filler words and hesitations you never notice in the moment. Plus, you can track progress, listen to your first attempt, then your 5th, and the difference is usually obvious.
And if you have a study partner, try swapping roles. One acts as the examiner and notes where your answer feels flat or off topic. That's how you spot patterns, like always forgetting to mention when or why you visit your favorite place.
So, if I describe my favorite cafe but forget to say what makes it special to me, that's a missed opportunity, right? Should I focus more on emotions or facts?
Balance both. The best answers blend personal feelings with vivid details. Here's the takeaway. Rehearse, record, and review. Each round, push for one new detail or clearer emotion, and your score will reflect that effort. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much organizing a story for IELTS mirrors what you need in a job interview, structuring your answer, highlighting key details, and keeping your listener engaged.
That's true, and there's research showing that people who can adapt their language to different audiences are rated as more persuasive and memorable, whether they're networking or just making new friends.
But what if someone feels nervous or thinks their story isn't interesting enough? Does practicing for IELTS really help with confidence outside the test room?
Absolutely. Repeatedly telling your story, even about something simple like your favorite place, builds fluency and self-assurance. That practice translates directly to real conversations where you want to make a strong impression.
And it's not just about confidence. When you learn to organize your thoughts clearly, you avoid rambling, something that's crucial in professional settings, especially when time is limited.
I guess it also helps you listen better, right? If you're used to thinking about your audience, you start noticing what other people need from a conversation too.
Here's the takeaway. Mastering storytelling for IELTS isn't just exam prep. It's a toolkit for expressing yourself, connecting with others, and stepping into new opportunities with confidence. Thanks for joining us as we explored how these skills go far beyond the classroom.